Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm going to keep this intro straightforward. I have not even the slightest clue on how to explain today's video. I guess that's what makes these stories unexplainable. A story about getting lost in a national forest. A story about some more than odd things happening in a hotel. Today's video will definitely have you on the edge of your seats. The writer's links can be found in the description. A huge thank you to them for allowing me to share these frightening tales. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com if you'd like to have it featured on the channel. Likes and comments are always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the stories, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've been immersed in darkness for 3 days, or at least I think it's been 3 days. This isn't a sort of metaphorical darkness, or darkness of spirit either. I swear I'm not crazy. I figure this is the time to introduce myself. My name doesn't matter, but all you need to know is that I'm your average college junior, who is also an avid hiker. I've hiked one trail every weekend since I was 15. So I know all the best secluded spots around the country. I walked into the Great Smoky National Park 3 days ago, a trip meant to allow me peace and quiet, an escape from the academic life that had left me mentally drained. I didn't camp as often as I hiked, but after the stress of the semester, I was desperate for some time with Mother Nature. I was trying a new trail this time, a tip I took from a friend of mine who is also an avid hiker. It was supposed to be relaxing. At least that's what the idiot at the ranger station told me. The trail was so basic a toddler could hike it without supervision. My mother urged me not to embark into the wilderness for a camping trip by myself, but being a brat, the idea of her disapproval just fueled the excitement for the trip. I was an adult and I was going to do it myself. God, I wish I could have just shut the hell up. At first, walking through the white oak trees was serene, the backdrop filled with chirping birds and chittering insects. During my hike, I even passed a stream so dainty, I could have plucked it straight out of the Thoreau's work. I was beginning to achieve the level of clarity I had come searching for. I was so pleased, as a matter of fact, that I could have left right then and there, but something about the surrounding wilderness and the whispering of the wind drew me to stay. It was only going to be one night. God, I wish I would have just gotten the hell out. I found a perfect camping spot. It was atop one of the lower peaks of the trail, and it was nestled in between thick brushes of trees. It was secluded, cool, and safe. I thought it was perfect. But as soon as day fell, and the icy breeze blew, I knew something had gone terribly wrong. I knew I had been an idiot. I knew I should have listened to my mother. I knew I should have left. I knew it the minute I saw something staring at me. Night had just arrived and I was packing up and sorting my kitchen utensils. I heard a rustling in the trees. It could have been the wind. At least my rational mind was telling me it was. But then I heard it. It was a chuckle. It wasn't the chuckle of a child receiving a piece of finely wrapped candy. It wasn't the chuckle of an adult trying to laugh at a humorless joke. The chuckle was cruel, throaty, filled with phlegm, and ranging several octaves. I swear I'm not crazy. I turned around, even though my feet felt like concrete, and that's when I saw him. It was a massive, lanky thing. It looked like a person who had been drenched and permanently covered with some sort of black tar. Its eyes weren't even eyes at all, just large, perfectly round holes where 2 yellow beads sat. And when it noticed me noticing it, I almost threw up my one-pot chicken teriyaki, because it smiled at me. But it wasn't a regular smile, like the one you give the barista after she hands you your coffee. This was menacing, and almost impossibly long. Its smile stretched from one corner of his face to the other, continually reaching higher and higher up its face, with an impossibly large amount of teeth. So there it stood, its lanky limbs wrapped around the tree, with only its head poking through to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't understand. I think I might have said something, or stepped forward, because then it chuckled once more and skipped away from me into the forest, whistling. I swear I'm not crazy. I didn't sleep that night. I prayed that it wouldn't come back. I prayed that I would wake and, like the fairy queen Titania, this would be a distant dream. But then the sun didn't come up. 5 a.m. passed, 6 a.m. passed, then 7, then 8. The whole day had gone by and I was still shrouded in darkness. The crappy Mickey Mouse watch I wore ticking with every passing hour. I wasn't an idiot. I tried to find my way out. I ran, abandoning all my supplies, and trying to find the beginning of the trail, but where the trail should have started, it just continued into deeper forest. I swear I'm not crazy. That same night I stopped at the dainty stream, that didn't seem so dainty anymore, and tried washing the fear sweat out of my clothes. The atmosphere was cloaked in black, and the once gentle stream became terrifying, the murky water still and unmoving. No signs of life other than myself. I didn't want to, but the fear made me stink and I stripped and dunked my body into the stream. I heard it again. That goddamn chuckle. My head whipped around trying to find the source of the noise, and it was futile for a bit. Darkness surrounded me, and this thing was basically a chameleon in it. But then I heard a soft, subtle splash. The thing was in the water with me. I felt tingles creep up my spine as I crossed my arms across my bare chest. I could feel its beady eyes piercing the back of my skull as it began to whistle that same song. I turned around, slowly and hesitantly, and restrained my fear as my breath hitched. It was in the water with me. It was watching me, again. This time its confidence was boosted. Before it was like a fly on the wall, or a squirrel a safe distance away. But now it was arm's length away from me. My body was trembling as muffled squeals escaped my nervous lips. It was almost completely submerged in the water, just showing the slit where its nose was supposed to be, up to the top of its head. I could tell it was smiling because hints of white teeth were poking out of the murky water. I didn't know if I should run or cry, or induce a life-ending heart attack. It wasn't moving. It just kept whistling and smiling. Two things I didn't know could happen at the same time. As it stared at me, it felt like an eternity. I couldn't tell how long I was in the water with that thing. Without the sun, time became irrelevant. Everything was hovering in a state of perpetual eternity. Eventually, the thing either got bored or hungry, because it swam back the way it came with a chuckle. I watched it crawl out of the murky water on all fours, as it began to laugh maniacally. It kept laughing as it stood on its legs and skipped away from me again. Its head turned back to look at me as it left. I swear I'm not crazy. I stood there in the water till my skin almost slid off. I hid in a tree for the rest of the night. So the second night came and went. At least I think it did. The next dark day was dedicated to finding my way out. I tried retracing my steps to come back to my original campsite. I had been an idiot and left the map. When I came back, everything was torn to shreds. The bag containing my spare food, gone. The map giving me any hope of freedom, destroyed. The compass, the one thing that could guide me in this eternal night, smashed to pieces. Now as I lay cowering on the ground, I think this is what it wanted. It wants me to panic. It wants me to break down and cry. It wants me paranoid. I think this is my third night, but how do you tell time when the sun won't show its face? If the sun never rises and the new day doesn't begin, is time even relevant at all? I know the creature will visit me again tonight. I hear its melodic whistling against the howling of the wind. I know it's going to come even closer tonight. I can feel the icy tingle envelop my body. I know it's coming to get me. I can hear the broken leaves crunching on the floor. I know it wants me. I can hear the gross chuckle. Its yellow beads, its thousands of teeth, its slick black body. It's coming for me. This time it's going to get me. God, I swear I'm not crazy. If you find this, turn around immediately. Do not dismiss this as some crazy person's rants. If you hear rustling in the trees, don't investigate. Just leave. If you hear the whistling, abandon everything and run. One of the best things about working overnight at the hotel was the abundance of entertaining nightlife. The late hours brought in all kinds of folks, from drunken travelers to drug dealers, prostitutes, and cheating lovers. And every so often, a homeless person, especially during the colder months. Since I was the one that usually ended up working most overnight shifts, I would welcome the homeless folks to warm up in the lobby for a while. I would bring them hot chocolate, let them watch TV and use the internet, and would often sit and chat if I wasn't busy with paperwork. Eventually, I had convinced my boss to let me provide a room for the occasional homeless person who came through. "You know how those people are," he had said, and we simultaneously repeated his mantra. "You give an inch, they take a mile." I had argued that the hotel was never fully booked up, and that we always had plenty of other rooms available for potential paying customers. The occasional homeless guy staying for one night in a warm bed wasn't going to hurt anybody. When he finally gave in, I guaranteed that I would use discretion as far as what I would allow, and promised to have the rooms cleaned before housekeeping arrived in the morning. "You know that no good can come out of this, right?" My boss had sighed. "They'll start to tell their friends that little Miss Free Handouts works up at this hotel. Soon enough, this place will be crawling with toothless freeloaders." I shrugged. "I won't let it get to that point," I said, promising again to use my best judgment. My boss made a joke about me being overly sympathetic and too good for this world, then chuckled and gave me a pat on the back. So that was it. I kept my promise and made sure the situation stayed very low-key. I asked each homeless guest to be quiet and courteous, and to leave by 6:30 a.m., which gave them enough time to stop by the breakfast bar and grab some food before they left. I made sure that the sheets were replaced and that the room was deep cleaned after every stay. My secret profitless business was running smoothly. Until the night before New Year's Eve. I was mindlessly picking at my fingernails, waiting for the last few scheduled guests to filter in. The lobby TV was quietly humming a jazzy jingle, while reeling through weather predictions for the upcoming day. Snow and lots of it. Temperatures had plunged below zero, and a thick layer of snow had already built up in the main road outside. I hadn't noticed any cars go by in over an hour, so I assumed the remaining reservations were going to be no-shows. As I went to delete the no-shows from the system and prepare for my nightly audit, the lobby door swished open. The sudden noise startled me, as I had been sort of lost in my thoughts. "Just in time," I joked, still focused on the computer. I assumed nobody else was. I stopped short as I fixed my eyes on the woman in front of me. She was older, very pale, and had a thin, wrinkly face that resembled a melting candle. She was wearing a heavy jacket that was zipped all the way up to her chin. On her head was a fraying knit hat, with snowflakes clinging to the woolly material, and scraggly strands of gray hair poking out from underneath. She had an overwhelming stench, like rotten eggs, and had bits of dirt caked into her pores. The thing that really took me back a bit were her eyes. They were completely cloudy and gray, as if she were blind, but I could feel her staring right at me. Her gaze was lifeless, practically sending a shiver down my spine. Feeling rude for gawking, I apologized, and said I was expecting somebody else. She didn't say anything, didn't even blink. I chuckled uncomfortably and asked if she had a reservation. Again, nothing. Just that soulless stare that seemed to go right through me. The old woman's appearance and that unmistakable stench told me that she was homeless, probably seeking shelter from the raging snowstorm outside. A lot of the homeless passerby were exceptionally bizarre people, so I had pretty much chalked up the old woman to be just that. "Do you need a room?" I asked quietly. I wasn't quite sure what else to say. The old woman nodded slowly, her first actual acknowledgement of me. I felt my body relax a bit. I asked her to take a seat in the lobby and told her I would get a room ready for her, but she wordlessly refused to sit down. She kept her eyes locked onto mine. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a little crumpled up piece of paper. She placed it on the desk and slid it towards me. My eyebrows raised in confusion. Was she mute? And handing me a note explaining why she wasn't speaking or something? My brain reeled over the possibilities. But as I unfolded the little paper, I felt my stomach drop. They're watching me. I blinked and stuttered in confusion. I just kept reading the note, over and over. Those 3 absolutely bone-chilling words. My breath had stopped. My heart was racing. I had no idea what was going on. Who were they? Were they watching right now? Was she just crazy? Wordlessly, I handed the note back to the old woman. She hadn't broken her gaze, her cloudy gray eyes still fixated on mine. I instinctively wanted to glance over to the window and scan my surroundings, but I was too afraid to look away. I felt frozen in place. The printer whirred and snapped me back to reality. I leaned in closer to the old woman. "Are you safe?" I whispered. She shook her head, and I clenched my jaw a bit. "Do you need me to call the police?" She shook her head again. "Is someone looking for you?" The old woman turned her head to the sliding glass double doors that led outside. Her empty eyes seemed to be scanning the parking lot. I hesitantly followed her gaze and looked outside as well, noticing nothing but her footprints in the snow leading up to the hotel. She turned back to me and held out her hand. "Is someone after you?" I repeated. She pushed her open hand closer to me, a gesture that I assumed was her way of demanding her room key. I obeyed. As I programmed the room key, I explained my rules to her and promised there would be no questions asked. "This is a key to room number 103, I explained. "The door is right around the corner, so if you need me, just dial 0 on the phone and I'll be there ASAP, okay?" The woman nodded. She held the room key close to her chest and sauntered around the corner. I held my breath until I heard her door latch close, then let out a huge sigh and allowed my body to untense. What the hell had just happened? I had seen quite a few crazy homeless people, but had never had an interaction quite as creepy. I started to worry about whether or not the decision to let her stay was a good idea, but she had seemed afraid of something, or somebody. She needed to be somewhere safe. My eyes nervously shifted back to the lobby door. It was a hotel rule that we had to leave it unlocked at all hours, but I was considering locking it out of sheer paranoia. If somebody really was coming for this woman, I had no way of knowing if they were dangerous, or what they even wanted in the first place. It didn't take long for me to convince myself to lock the doors. I shuffled across the lobby and nearly threw myself at the door in an attempt to lock it as quickly as possible. The latch clicked shut, and I let out a sigh, running my fingers along the cool glass of the door. Was I just being spooked over nothing? My chain of thought was immediately broken as I noticed 3 tall, dark shadows standing across the parking lot. The falling snow made it hard to see clearly, but the street lamp above was able to shed some light on what resembled 3 people facing the building. I frantically waved my arms out the front door, assuming it was a group of late arrivals. "Hey," I yelled. Doors open. We have rooms." Then I made a peculiar observation. There were no cars to accompany them, and no tire tracks in the snow. They just stood there by the dim light of the street lamp. Typically, the homeless guests that came through on foot traveled alone, so this group of travelers seemed exceptionally strange. They hadn't moved. They were just watching the building, seemingly unaffected by the heavy wind and snow. I went with my gut and latched the lock on the front door as quickly as I could. My heart was racing as I dove behind the front desk and frantically fumbled for my cell phone. With shaking fingers, I dialed my boyfriend's phone number. I had decided against calling the police, because technically there was no emergency. I just needed to make sense of everything. The phone line purred twice before he answered.
"Hey,"
he mumbled. "Henry?" I breathed. "Something really weird is going on and I don't know if I'm being totally crazy or not."
"You sound scared,"
Henry said. I could hear the concern in his voice, hear him shift uncomfortably. He hated the fact that I worked the overnight shift, especially since I was the only employee in the entire hotel. "Yeah, I'm a little scared, but I think I'm doing it to myself."
"Do you need me to come down there?"
"No."
"Can you tell me what happened?"
I recapped the old woman, the note, the 3 people that were currently standing outside the hotel. Henry was quiet for a few seconds before responding. He asked about the figures in the parking lots, and if they were still out there. "I don't know." I gripped the phone tightly in my hand. Should I check and see? Henry told me to just take a peek, and had to encourage me to look up from my hiding place. I was honestly scared of what I might see. To my surprise, the shadows in the parking lots had vanished. Now the umbrella of light from the street lamp only illuminated the falling snow. I almost felt relieved, until I immediately noticed something odd. A second set of footprints in the snow, leading up to the front door. I lifted my head a bit to get a better view, and was able to confirm that there were in fact 2 sets of tracks by the front door. One continued inside, and turned to small watery puddles on the lobby floor, from the old woman that came in earlier. The other stopped, right at the front door, 2 feet standing side by side, and the trail did not turn around to continue the other way. It just ended. I double-checked the door to make sure it was still locked. I told Henry I felt like I was going crazy. He said he was bundling up to head over to the hotel, and would be there soon, and told me to keep the doors locked until he got there.
"If things get any weirder, will you call the police?"
He asked, and I agreed. His discomfort worried me a bit. "Yeah, just drive safe," I whimpered. "But please get here as soon as you can." About 30 minutes later, I was startled by a sudden blood-curdling wail. My heart leapt and I jumped from my seat, causing my paperwork to scatter all over the floor. I held my breath and listened intensely for a moment, before another scream echoed through the halls. The noise had come from the first floor, more specifically from room number 103, the room that the homeless old woman was staying in. I hesitated, remembering how creepy she was, and was shaken once again by the front desk phone suddenly ringing. I gasped out loud. My shaky hands picked up the phone, only to answer a noise complaint from the guest that was staying in the room next to the old woman. I apologized and said that I was going to investigate, but the guest interrupted me with a huffy explanation of how he had to wake up early, before abruptly ending the call. I took a deep, deep breath. The complaint call was almost comforting, in a weird way. It reminded me that there were still other people in the building, and that I was probably just being jumpy for no reason. My heart rate started to settle as I made my way towards room 103. I knocked loudly and waited. Nothing. Knocked again, louder. Again, nothing. "Ma'am, are you okay in there?" Still nothing. After standing at the front door for a moment, dumbfounded, I gathered my wits and assumed it was a medical emergency. I fumbled for my master key and slid it through the card scanner, unlocking the door with a click. As I reached for the doorknob, my brain reeled over the possibilities of what I would find behind that door. My mind was intruded by gruesome images of the old woman's lifeless body sprawled out on the floor, her stone-cold eyes still staring at me. I shook off the thought and slowly cracked the door, barely peeking inside the room. "Ma'am?" I called shakily as I pushed the door open a bit more. I could see that the lights had been turned off. I cursed under my breath, of fucking course. I slipped my arm through the crack in the door and felt around for the light switch, half expecting them to not cut on like they tend to do in the horror movies. I ended up giving myself a fright when the lights did flip on. "Get your shit together," I thought to myself, shaking my head, feeling sort of silly about how spooked I was. But how could I not be? The whole night had just been weird. I thought about the note, those 3 gut-wrenching words, the figures outside in the snow, the footprints, the screams. I pushed the door all the way open, quickly, like ripping a band-aid off. What I saw in the room made me stop in my tracks. Nothing. The bed hadn't been touched. The comforter was still neatly folded over, the pillows set perfectly in place. The TV had not been turned on, the remote still sitting on the nightstand. It was as if nobody had even been in the room. My jaw clenched. The night was somehow getting unfathomably weirder. I scanned the room for any signs of the old woman. She couldn't have just disappeared. I had just heard her screaming. I poked my head in the bathroom. Nothing. I opened up the closet. Nothing. Then something caught my eye. I almost had to do a double take because I didn't quite believe my eyes at first. It was another note, sitting on the desk. The only trace of evidence I could find. I tiptoed over to the small scrap of paper. "They're watching you." At this point, I was so scared that I felt tears welling up in my eyes. My throat was closing up like I was about to cry. My heart was racing. What is going on? I stood frozen in place for a moment before sprinting back to the front desk. I needed Henry to get here. I needed him to make me feel protected, to make sense of everything. I was so blinded by fear that I couldn't think straight. I swiped my phone off the desk so I could call Henry to see how close he was to the hotel. As I unlocked my phone, I saw that I had a text message notification from him. Had he arrived? Was he waiting outside? I glanced out the double doors to see if I could spot his car, and Henry was there. He was standing in the footprints that I had seen earlier, the ones that ended right at the door, and didn't turn back. It was Henry all right, but his eyes had been gouged out. There was so much blood that his face was hardly recognizable. I couldn't even tell if he was dead or alive. My vision was fading. I felt like I was going to throw up. I was so numb. This couldn't be real. I could barely lift my phone in front of my face to call the police. I blinked hard. The text message from Henry was up on the screen, slowly revealing itself in my blurry field of vision. "We're watching you." A couple of my friends came over to my house during fall break, and we were relaxing while watching movies. My brother brought up the fact that we have a hiking trail behind our house, and my friends begged me to take them. Not asking my brother because he tended to be a jerk to people at the time. I asked my mom and she gave us flashlights, warning us to be careful while walking by the ditch on the side of the path. We assured her that we'd be fine, and headed off to the trail. We walked for a bit, my brother running ahead then jumping out to scare that one girl who's easily scared. We got to a part where the path curves around a mountain, also giving us an option to go on a metal bridge if we wanted to go up the mountain. The group talked about which way to go when one of the girls screamed. We turned towards her as she was shaking, pointing down a steep hill towards a river. Someone point the flashlight down there. She nearly whimpered out as a guy walked forward, shining his light down the hill. At first we didn't see anything, so we started teasing her about being scared over nothing. The laughter was cut short when a tall-like figure stepped in front of the light, seemingly looking up at us. He was like a shadow and we couldn't see any visible features, and we were all probably shitting bricks just looking at him. Well, at least that's how it felt. One of the guys toughened up, and was probably going to ask the guy if he needed help or something, but he couldn't say a word as the figure charged at us. We all screamed and started running back to my house, none of us looking back until we made it inside the house. We ran inside and locked the door, my mother walking in just in time with hot chocolate for everybody. We told her what happened and she scolded us, claiming it was a homeless person wandering around in the mountains. We tried to correct her, but she just told us to drink our hot chocolate and headed into the kitchen to watch a movie. My friends and I decided to never bring it up again, mainly because we thought that nobody would believe us. I still live in the same house, with my parents, at least until I go to college, and still haven't seen that figure since.